Okay, yes, I'm Kimberly Long-Ewing. I have a book coming out June 2016 called Curse of the Goblin Travelers. I'm going to read to you some excerpts of chapters 3 and 5 as they stand currently. Editors are strange creatures. I want you to imagine a continent the size of Australia with mountains as tall and dense as the Himalayas covering it from coast to coast. The people there fill the valleys, but there's still not enough room. So if you look up into the skies, you see flocks of airships, not quite zeppelins, not quite hot air balloons. They fly where the winds carry them. They learn to ride the wild currents of the winds that blow between the many, many mountain passes. This is where the story happens. In the story, we meet 10-year-old twins, Corey and Emmy. Emmy rolled over and blinked. Through bleary eyes, it took her a moment to understand what her da wanted. He was wearing his brown leather travel coat. Emmy, I need you to wake up now. We're launching in 10 minutes, he said. What time is it? Emmy sat up and rubbed the sleep from her eyes. It was still dark. Too early to be certain. Come on. Da went to wake Corey. Emmy rolled out of her bunk and yawned, then pulled a sack from under her bed. Her fingers closed on a clean shirt and pants. She pulled them out and tossed them on the bed, then retrieved her favorite purple and blue coat. She dressed quickly. I'm going up on deck now, Emmy said. Thank you, Emmy. Da stowed a loose pan. Corey, last call. Emmy poked her twin brother as she ran past his bunk. Get up. 10-year-olds don't get to sleep in like hatchlings. We gotta help. Corey grumbled something incoherently as she ran up the steps to the main deck. Emmy heard sharp voices as she came up through the hatch. You think about what you're doing, said Mariani, the flock leader. I have. Ma had the fire stoked and was filling the envelope. She motioned Emmy, come take over while I pull up the anchor lines. Mariana harumphed and stomped down the ramp. What about breakfast? Asked Emmy. Later, fledgling. Ma strode over to the corner of the gondola and hauled up a rope. Emmy knelt by the stove and poked at the fire. The eastern sky was turning gray in the pre-dawn hour. She yawned and added more coal to the burner. Da came up on deck. He pulled the ramp closed, secured it, then went to coil another rope. Are the Tinkers leaving already? Barry, the healer, called as he walked toward the balloon. Da called back, why are you up so early, Barry? Oh, Athari had her baby during the night. Everything going well? Yes. There was a pause. Then he continued from close to the gondola. Are you certain about this, Rosie? Well, Leary is anyway, Da answered, referring to Ma. I do think a bit of distance would make it easier to scout the current the flock is taking. Will you come with us? Someone needs to stay and heal their wounds when they happen, Barry answered grimly. Fair winds, my friend. Da waved. I'll see you when the wind blows us your way again. Corey finally came up on deck and flopped down against the wall just in time for Ma to rouse them with the call to stations. Emmy moved to a vent rope and stood ready. Corey, she noted, was still half asleep as he leaned against the railing, head lolling to one side. The camp below was still asleep as they drifted upward. Emmy caught a glimpse of the flock leader, Mariani, watching them angrily from the deck of her gondola. Ma, Emmy called. It's all fine, Emmy, Ma assured her, as she adjusted the heat and the balloon rose faster. Emmy caught her da's eye as he came round on the last check. He paused to tighten the strap on the crate and smiled reassuringly at her. Sometimes adults have differences of opinion. You and your friends do that sometimes, right? Yeah, said Emmy. She twisted the rope between her fingers. Da gently pulled the rope out of her hand and wrapped it properly around her palm. He continued, and you make up after everyone calms down. Emmy frowned. Did Ma and Mariana have a fight? Oh, pretty much. He tousled her hair. Not the first time, and I doubt it's the last. Where are we going? Emmy asked. We'll head over to the festival a little early and visit with the other flocks. Everyone is always glad to see a tinker. A breakfast of bread and berries came as the sun broke over the horizon. They were drifting high in the clouds among the mountain peaks, and Ma seemed relaxed. Emmy brought her a cup of tea. "So why are you and Mariani fighting?" Ma sighed. "I don't like where she's going and don't want to follow her there." "Oh, are we joining another flock?" Corey was finally awake enough to pay attention. "Wait, we're not going back? Who will teach me healing?" "No one said anything about joining another flock," Dad said with a meaningful look at Ma. "A flock, like a balloon, sometimes needs time to cool off if tempers are too hot." "No one is ruling it out either," said Ma. She shook her head. "It's too soon to decide. Let's worry about it later." "But who will teach me?" repeated Corey. "There are healers in every flock," assured Dot. "We'll have no trouble finding you a teacher wherever we go." "But I like Barry," he insisted. Emmy rolled her eyes. "Stop whining. You might like the other healers too." "I am not whining." "That's enough," Ma said mildly. "One argument a day is enough for this balloon, and I've used it up already. The two of you will have to get along at least until tomorrow." The twins spent the day carefully not arguing. They poked, glared, and made faces, but they were definitely not arguing. Warning looks from Dot kept it from boiling over. After Emmy tripped over Corey's leg, which she just happened to stretch out as she was passing, Dot sent them to separate corners to work on their studies. Emmy flipped through diagrams of gauge designs, occasionally glaring over at Corey where he was pretending to read a book on medicinals. She could tell he was pretending because he was holding the book upside down while quietly singing a song. Emmy sighed and traced the line of an altimeter with her finger. "I'd swear that storm cloud is following us," muttered Ma. Dot laughed. "It's just riding the same current as us. Though if like attracts like, then every cloud for miles around would be following you." "Very funny." She threw another coal into the burner. "Let's rise up and see if we can catch a crosswind, maybe get out of its path." The balloon rose and rounded a mountain peak. Conditions grew rapidly worse as they flew into a dark bank of storm clouds boiling up over the valley. Strong winds buffeted the balloon and rocked the gondola. Lightning flashed and jumped from cloud to cloud, and deep thunder dislodged small avalanches of rock down the sides of the mountain. "Stations," Ma ordered. Corey and Emmy quickly stowed their books and took up their positions at the vent ropes. Da ran forward and leaned out to see the ground, looking for a place to land. The sky opened up and sheets of rain poured down. "Open the vents," ordered Ma. The wind whipped rain into Emmy's face as she pulled on the cord. Cold air rushed up around her and into the balloon envelope, chasing out the hot air through the vent. They drifted down. Lightning flashed and thunder boomed, shaking the gondola. Ozone mingled with smoke from the burner. She gripped the railing tightly with one hand and waited for orders. The wet cord was cutting into the fingers of her other hand. Corey clung to another cord on the opposite side of the deck. Their eyes met briefly as another flash of lightning illuminated his face. His dark eyes were wide and his expression grim. His long, dark braid fell down his back and dripped water onto the deck. It was as heavy with water as her own, and he looked as terrified as she was. This was the worst storm they'd seen in their 10-year-old lives. Darkness fell over them as the balloon drifted into a storm cloud. Flashes of lightning created a world of tableaus. Ma feeding the burner charcoal and monitoring the winds. Her short dark hair whipped wildly in the wind and her brow furrowed in concentration. Another flash showed Da at the front of the gondola. He stared intently through his spyglass and watched for landing spots and obstacles. His long dark hair was plastered smooth by the rain against his head and his shoulders. A silver clasp held the front of his hair out of his face and reflected the lightning and flames from the burner. The gondola swayed violently in a gust of wind between flashes. "Close the vents," shouted Ma. "This isn't working. We have to rise." Corey and Emmy both tugged at the cords, then twisted them down toward the center. Corey's ran up through his hands as his vent closed. Emmy's cord hung limp. She frantically tugged and twisted again to no avail. The balloon continued to drift downward, aided by a sudden downdraft that nearly collapsed the envelope. "Close it," her mother repeated. I can't, it's not working, Emmy cried out helplessly. Then Da was there, his large hands folded over hers to take the rope. She let him take it, relieved that it would no longer be her problem. He tugged and twisted the rope a few times and shook his head. He said kindly, "It's no fault of yours, fledgling. It's stuck open." Louder, he called to Ma, "I'm going up." He pressed the cord back into her hand. Ma closed the burner. Da quickly climbed up one of the thick ropes that secured the envelope to the gondola. He was a dark shadow against the warm glow of the envelope and the cold blue lightning. He went through the throat, smoke from the burner swirling around him. Each lightning flash revealed his progress up the support braces. Emmy felt the cord pull upward when he freed the vent, and she twisted it toward the center. This time, the cord slid between her hands as the vent closed. She drew a deep breath of relief. That relief was short-lived. A bright flash and deafening boom shook the balloon. Her stomach dropped as the balloon dropped sharply, and Emmy was floating in a sea of rain. She landed on the deck and rolled onto her back, still gripping the limp cord. The heat instantly dried her as a fireball consumed the envelope. Her family sigil, 2 gold tinker's hammers crossing on a field of white, floated by her and melted away as it was consumed by fire. She searched for some sign of Da. A white sparrow on a field of green, the sigil of her flock, hovered above her, its wings and eyes outlined in flame. It drifted upward on the current of heat, then swooped down with a gust of wind. Emmy tossed in her sleep, images from the storm flashing in her mind like lightning. Da outlined up in the envelope, the smell of burning wood, fire-consuming silk, a glowing sparrow falling on her. She screamed and sat up. Warm darkness cradled her. Birds sang and argued nearby, and a dry breeze whispered in leaves and fabric. Her heartbeat slowed and she drew deep breaths. She called, "Ma? Da?" There was movement to her right. A rustle of cloth and a scrape of wood on wood. A man spoke to her, his accent softening his words and smoothing the sharper sounds. "Easy, young one. You're safe." "I want my ma," Emmy said in a small voice. Tears burned her eyes. Her brow furrowed in annoyance. She was too old to cry. She cleared her throat and tried to sound more grown-up. "Will you fetch her?" The man sighed. A moment of silence passed, then he said something in the tongue of the valley folk. Emmy heard a door open and close softly. The man said to her in her own traveler tongue, "I've sent for your brother. How are you feeling?" Emmy wasn't going to admit to being scared. Her fingers traced the contours of the blanket and pressed down into clouds under warm linen. She settled on admitting to a small amount of ignorance. "Why is it dark in here?" There was a long pause. She heard the man stand up, his footsteps moving around the end of the bed and to her left. Wood skittered across wood, and darkness faded from black to dark gray. The footsteps moved back around to her right, and the bed sank as the man sat on the edge. She looked in his direction, but saw only darkness. "How many fingers am I holding up?" Emmy shook her head. "I can't see." Her voice caught on a lump in her throat. She managed to choke out in a whisper, "I can't see." She buried her face in her hands, willing her eyes to work again. A hand gently rested on her hair. "You hit your head when your balloon crashed. I'm sorry. It was most concerning when we were unable to wake you for 3 days. Your brother has been worried about you. Here." He pressed a handkerchief into her hands. It smelled of lavender and sage. Emmy wiped her face and sniffled. "And my ma and Da?" "They didn't survive," he said softly. The door opened and the bed shifted as the man stood up and moved out of the way. She heard Corey's rapid footsteps as he ran across the room. She braced herself just in time for him to leap onto the bed and barrel into her, knocking her back into a pile of soft pillows. "You're awake," he said joyfully. Emmy laughed and hugged him tightly. Then the tears started again and she sobbed. Corey sat up, pulling her up with him, and he held her close. "Emmy?" The man said gently, "Your sister has lost her sight." Emmy felt hot tears fall on her shoulder. "It'll be okay, Emmy, I promise," whispered Corey. "I'll find a way to fix it." "I'll leave you two alone. I'll come for you when it's time for dinner." Footsteps faded away and the door shut with a soft click. Emmy pulled back and wiped her nose with the handkerchief. "I'm thirsty." "I'll get you some water." The air next to Emmy cooled when her brother moved away from her and scrambled off the bed, causing ripples across the mattress. Emmy asked, "Where are we?"